Okay, here we are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For those of you who are following this next general session, day 3 of 11th Cloud Expo. Here we have now, as I say, Rackspace taking the stage, the IT talent shift. I'm fascinated by this one, so I am going to be as attentive as the rest of you. Let's give it up, please, for Lisa Larson from Rackspace. And I leave it to you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm really super excited to be here today on behalf of Rackspace on a topic that I'm very super passionate about. So what I'm going to talk about today is the IT talent shift that has to occur as you adopt cloud. So you're hearing a lot about cloud adoption, the technology changes, developing applications in the cloud, and how to select the right service provider. But what you're not hearing a lot about right now is that IT talent shift that has to change, because really the business of IT is going to change as you move to the cloud. But first, a little bit about me. I'm Lisa Larson. I'm VP of Enterprise Technical Sales at Rackspace. I've been a Racker for about 2 years now, and you can see my contact details up there if you want to get a hold of me. So the first concept to really wrap your head around is that cloud is really a new way of thinking. Think about this. Virtualization was a technology, but cloud is really a business model change. And what do I mean by that? So think about cloud in this way. The business of IT is changing. The way that you go about procuring and securing and deploying your cloud applications are different. And you have to have a mindset shift on how you procure and deliver those applications for your business. So believe it or not, there is a right way and a wrong way to adopt cloud. And so you've probably seen some of these right ways. Getting flexible infrastructure, being able to spin up and scale up your capacity, reducing your provisioning times. These are all things that are about the right way to adopt cloud. The wrong way to think about cloud is really only thinking about it as cost, as a way to save money. That's the wrong way to think about cloud adoption. So I'm going to teach you the smart approach to cloud adoption as your IT organization. So I'm going to teach you some principles about how to develop and how to deploy cloud the smart way. So we've come up with an acronym here, and this is the smart approach to cloud adoption. So the first step is to really develop a service provider mentality. Treat your business as a service to your end users. The second step is to mandate DevOps, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The third step is to allocate your IT resources, and really here what you're thinking about is how do those skill sets change as you adopt cloud. You want to maximize your ROI in the cloud because the way that you consider ROI in the cloud is going to change. And finally, you want to take control of your cloud strategy. So let's dive right into it and talk about service provider mentality. It's easy for me to think about that because I am a service provider. Rackspace provides cloud services to our end users. But you as an IT organization have to adopt that concept as well. So if you were here yesterday, you heard John Engate speaking on behalf of Rackspace, and he talked about the consumerization of IT. So what's happening today is you, as a consumer, you have your mobile device, right? You're going out and getting applications on those mobile devices. Your end user is expecting that you're delivering IT services just like they can get off their mobile device. They want instant CPU, instant storage, instant provisioning. And finally, they want that instant gratification. In addition to this, the way that you're interacting with your customers is also changing. Your customers are going to your web. You probably have a mobile applications, and they're browsing and looking at your products and services through a web interface. And they're looking at status on those orders through a web interface. So the way that your consumers and your customers are getting services from you has changed as well. And that's putting added pressure on the IT organization to deliver service faster. John also talked about bring your own device and mobile. But one of the things that he didn't cover was this concept of do-it-yourself cloud. So your end users are going out and procuring their own cloud services because it's easy. All it takes is a credit card, and they can spin up a cloud instance. We know that because a lot of those customers are at Rackspace. Your business units are coming to Rackspace and getting their own cloud services without your knowledge. What is that creating? Well, that's really creating shadow IT. So a recent survey said that 43% of all IT decision makers know that they have shadow IT in their organization. They know that they're going out and getting those services, going around the IT organization and procuring them on their own. Well, not all shadow IT is a bad thing. Our own CIO at Rackspace, Steve Mills, he's actually advocating shadow IT within reason. So think about some of those SaaS-based applications out there. As long as those applications are meeting compliance and security requirements, he's allowing that to happen. So at Rackspace, we use some standard SaaS-based applications like Salesforce or ClickView or Workday. Now he's got a whole team of 4,500 Rackers that are supporting themselves on those SaaS-based applications. He doesn't have to take 15 Rackers and devote them to supporting those SaaS-based applications. He's using shadow IT to his advantage. So what is shadow IT? So let's really go through this and define shadow IT. The business unit says, I need to spin up a new e-commerce application. I have a new website that I need to launch because I have a product that I want to bring to market. So they go out and say, hey, look, I want to get that fast. I want that speed, the agility, the flexibility. They come to the IT organization. But what's happening inside of your IT organization today? We know that 80% of your time is focused on keeping the lights on. And they say, sorry, we can't help you. So what happens as a result of that? Does the business unit go away? No. They're going out to a service provider and procuring those services on their own, and that's creating shadow IT. So what are some of the dangers of shadow IT? So unofficial use of the cloud, if you're not in control of that, your business unit are going out and procuring those services. That can lead to loss of control, governance requirements, security breaches, or compliance penalties. On the spend front, your end users are out in the wild and they're procuring their own services. You don't have any negotiated terms. You've diminished your liabilities controls around those service providers because they're just going out willy-nilly and getting those all on their own. All these things can lead to lost revenue, loss of business IP, profit erosion, spend ignorance, and vendor lock-in, because your end users are going out and procuring those services on their own. So what's the response that we can take as an IT organization? Well, the first step that we can do is we can try to ban the cloud. We can say, no cloud, nobody can use cloud. Well, that's unlikely to happen because remember, do-it-yourself cloud, your end users can go out there and spin up a cloud service all on their own. All it takes is that credit card transaction. The second approach that you could take is you could use your existing approval procedures for spending control. But think about that. If you're an IT organization that's been running for some time, those processes are probably outdated. And they're not built for cloud. They're not agile, not flexible, and not scalable. So the third approach that you could take is you can create new procedures for spending control. In here, what you're doing is you're embracing that change. You understand that cloud's going to be in your business, and you're going to create new procedures for how you manage spending control in the cloud. So the way that you'll do that is you're going to build a service catalog. So what is a service catalog? Is anybody familiar with service catalogs? ITIL is a framework, and it's through the service management framework in ITIL. So it can be as simple as an approved vendor list or as complex and robust as a user portal where your users are going out and procuring those services through that service catalog that presented in a web interface or portal. So how does a service catalog work? So in this concept, now you've created a service catalog. Your business unit comes to the internal IT department. And that IT department is working with a service provider like Rackspace. And together, the IT department and the service provider are creating a shared infrastructure and thinking about how do they provide computing resources to your business that meets security and compliance requirements. Now in this example, their service catalog has been pre-built up front. When that business unit comes to you and asks for those services, now you can help them, because really what you're doing is you're working through the service provider. You as the IT organization and the service provider have come together, and you've created that shared services catalog for your end users. Everybody's happy. So how do you build a service catalog? Well, the first step is to think about those business workloads, those common use cases that your end users are coming to you for cloud services. Those can be things like corporate websites, marketing campaigns, spinning up a new e-commerce site, a SaaS application, or building a platform for rich media. Once you've thought about what are all those common use cases that your end users are coming to you for, is you go off to your service provider and you start designing and building standard cloud configurations. Now you are in control. You're setting governance, you're setting those security requirements, you have control of that, and you're eliminating shadow IT. The other thing here is that you are in control and you're empowering a self-service organization. So think back to the example that I gave you about our own CIO sanctioning shadow IT. He's created an organization of 4,500 Rackers that are going out and managing their own SaaS-based applications. That's true self-service. So now let's take a look at the second thing, mandating DevOps. Anybody using DevOps? Anybody familiar with this concept? A few people? So what is DevOps? Well, it's an organizational structure that's being talked a lot about as a result of cloud adoption. But before I get into DevOps a little bit, I'm going to talk about virtualization. So think about virtualization. When you adopt a virtualization in your IT organization, all you were doing was virtualizing a physical device. You didn't really touch the application. There was really no change that you did with the application. But in the cloud world, now you have the ability to virtualize the servers, the storage, the networks. And now you have to start thinking about how do those applications change as you adopt the cloud. So really what you're doing is you're starting to pull together the developer community and the operations team, and you're putting them two in a box. The operations organization is going to get a deeper understanding of how applications are built. The developers are thinking about how code impacts the infrastructure. And as they're writing that code, they're thinking about platforms and developing that code based on a platform configuration. So why is it important to mandate a DevOps? Well, you can start to introduce these concepts, but it's only when you take a top-down approach and you're mandating that these two teams come together will really make a change in how you organize. So think about these two things, these two teams. You have your developer organization on one hand, your operations team on the other hand. Those two teams are inherently at odds with each other. Think about the developers. They get paid to write code. They love to write applications. They love to launch those applications out in the wild. So they're all about change. The operations organization, on the other hand, is all about stability and maintaining SLAs, keeping things up and running and operational. So that pits those two teams against each other. So you want to mandate that these two teams together come together and they learn from each other. So you really want to get the two teams together on the same bus or the same train. Really, what it's all about is you want to launch those applications and get faster time to market. So, mandate for DevOps. What are things that these two organizations start to learn from each other? Your developer organization is going to start to develop new skills. They're thinking about platform-based development. They're writing scalable applications and stateless applications that have fault tolerance built into the application. The operations organization is thinking about deploying applications in an automated fashion. So they're both learning new skills. In addition to that, they want to write those applications and deploy those applications in a standardized fashion. They're thinking about those applications. They're not infinitely customizable, and there are some limitations in deploying that. But again, it's all about time to market. You want to launch those applications as fast as possible to take advantage of that time to market. So what we are proposing is that you take this cross-functional team, you pull together the developers, the operations organization, and the last component is the finance team. And you may say, well, why do we really need to pull the finance organization into this? And the reason for that is that you want to take the developer team, the operations team, And you want to make sure that when you're developing and delivering and deploying applications, that you're thinking about this in terms of business and business context. How do you get those applications faster time to market, maximize the ROI and the spend that you have there? So let's take a look at the third approach here, allocating your resources. And this is all about the IT skill sets and how they will evolve. So today's IT operations organization, how many people run their own data center? How many people have a data center that their IT organization is all about? So you got a whole host of people that are running the day-to-day operations of that data center. You have people like backup administrators, systems administrators, storage engineers, network administrators, your network operations centers, deployment engineers. You get the idea, right? You've got a lot of people that are focused on the day-to-day operations of running a data center. So what are they not doing? They're not focused on the applications. They're running a data center. Is that really your core competency as a business? So what we believe is that IT operations skill sets will evolve. You'll get back to application focus because application focus is really going to create true business value. It's not about running a data center. That's not what creates business value for your organization. So your service operations organization is thinking about configuration management and how to change the business process. So remember, cloud computing is a business model shift, and so your IT organization has to start thinking about how do they deliver IT services to the end users in a different way. So that service operations organization becomes service managers. Your systems administrators, remember now when you're mandating DevOps, your systems administrators, your operations teams are thinking about automating, how to automate and how to deploy applications in a different way. They're moving towards systems integration. Your procurement team is thinking about a different way of how they procure those IT assets. So here, they've got to get really, really good at contract negotiations and supplier management, because now you're taking part of your IT and you're outsourcing, you're taking that to a service provider. So I'm going to share a little analogy with you and talk about focusing on core competencies. So we have a company here, it's called On-Time Delivery. And that company prides themselves on providing services and deploying and getting their trucks out there and delivering services within 30 minutes or less of their expected on-time delivery. And they've built a reputation and a brand around their core competency, which is shipping things from point A to point B. There's a company also called A+ Cola. This company's core competency is all about cola formulas. They make soda. They know and they've figured out and researched how to get the best flavors out there and how to get those out to their consumers. So A+ Cola needs to know how to ship and distribute their product and get it onto the shelf. So the one thing that they could do is they can go out and go and get their own trucks and have a fleet of trucks, but they have to think about all those operations of maintenance, oil, and gas, all devoted to not their core competency. So they've gone out and they've procured services from a service provider like on-time delivery. Same thing happens with your core business. So think about all those people that are devoted to IT operations, that are running your data center. That's not your core competency. Your competency is about your business. But you've got all these people that are focused on the data center operations, building operations, maintenance, power, labor, cooling, costs. Take that, offload that CapEx spend that's all invested in the data center and move that to a service provider like Rackspace. Think about what Rackspace says. That is our core competency. When we deploy applications, we're deploying thousands of applications for hundreds of thousands of customers. That's our core competency. With thousands of deployments, every penny that's invested in that matters. For you as a business, where do you provide value back to the business? And where you're doing that, it's all in the apps. So my top prediction, the most sought after hire in IT right now is this whole concept of the cloud bizologies. I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but think about this. This person gets the business. Not only that, they get your business. They understand the cloud business model. They understand that cloud is a business model and what that means. They understand vital specialization and focusing on core competencies. They get the economics of the cloud, and they understand, because they've mandated DevOps, how to develop best fit solutions. So now let's talk a little bit about ROI maximization. So the way that you get ROI out of the cloud is also going to change. So what do we know today? Current state assessment tells us that time to market drives profitability. When you get your products and services to market faster, you drive 31% more profit. In addition to that, you gain a competitive advantage. If you're getting your products and services to market faster than your competitor, you're gaining a first mover advantage, and you can command a higher price or a premium for your service because you're out there first. Well, your organization is also looking to do more with less, or more the same if you're an IT organization. So CIOs today are challenged to do more with the same. They're looking at budgets from 2006. So your business is expecting more, delivering services faster, but you're doing that on an old budget. So how do you start leveraging cloud to maximize your ROI? And you're going to do that in two places: top line revenue growth and bottom line profit growth. So at the top line, let's take a look at that. What cloud is going to give you is the ability to launch more viable projects out into the market. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here. Time to market. Remember, time to market matters. So the faster that you get your products and services out there, the more that you can maximize your top line revenue. On the bottom line, you're gaining cost efficiencies. You get the ability to turn off the cloud, and that's how you're getting those profit growths at the bottom line. So let's talk a little bit about this whole concept of shifting CapEx dollars to OpEx dollars. Everybody heard about this? Huge buzzword out there in the market right now. So let's define CapEx just a little bit. So when you're an IT organization and you're procuring IT infrastructure assets, what you do is you procure that, you buy that asset, and you depreciate it over time, typically a 3-year period. An OpEx expense is one that you take that expense in the year that it was incurred. Compounding that, now you've got this whole concept of cloud OpEx. So let's compare and contrast CapEx and why CFOs and your finance people love CapEx and why they hate OpEx. So think about CapEx. CapEx is predictable. You buy an asset and then you depreciate that asset over the life. It's predictable. It's easy to take that expense and depreciate it over time. The OpEx side of things, and further complicating that, is cloud OpEx is those costs are variable. One month that cost could be high, the next month it can go down. Think about what that does with your finance organization when they can't predict what the cost will be and what that impact is to your cash flow projections. So what we believe is that cloud is going to allow more experimentation and innovation. So think about this. If you're an IT organization and you're going out and securing CapEx dollars, you have just a finite amount of budget to be able to decide which projects I'm going to fund for, say, 2013. And you go through all the approval process. You've got a bunch of projects that are in the hopper, and your finance team, along with the CIO, decides which projects they're actually going to fund. And they're doing that and projecting and predicting which projects will be the most viable, or which ones will bring you the most revenue. And they're doing that in a time of uncertainty. So as you're putting ideas into the funnel, as you move away from CapEx to OpEx, you get the opportunity to experiment more. So really what you're doing here is you don't have to have a huge investment spend up front when you're thinking about cloud. You're taking that OpEx and you're making and placing a little bet. You're launching something out there If it doesn't work out, hey, no problem. You turn that compute resource back to the service provider, and you don't have to worry about that CapEx investment and continuing to depreciate that over time. You've lowered the approval threshold, and all those IT approval processes, they just go away because now you've moved from CapEx to OpEx. And you're lowering that barrier to entry for all the projects. So think about it in a typical IT planning life cycle. You have projects that are above the line and projects that are below the line. So think about all those projects that you haven't funded because they didn't meet all the requirements you were looking for. So how many projects have you killed because you couldn't justify that CapEx spend? So that's really what I mean about experimentation is innovation is you have the ability to spin up. If it doesn't work out, hey, no problem. You can get rid of that compute resource. So you've probably seen some sort of variation on this slide here on the rent versus buy model. And really what you're banking on here in the cloud computing model is that, yes, the per unit cost of cloud is a bit more expensive. But really what you're banking on is that you're going to use that asset for a period of time, and then you're going to turn that back over to your cloud service provider. And really what it's all about is, think about it again, you want to accelerate that time to market because time to market drives more profitability for your business. So I'm going to share a story with you so that you can see how this ROI model works and how you're exploiting the cloud computing model. So think about the CapEx financial model of how you're traditionally provisioning your IT resources. So you go out, you work with the IT organization, you work with the finance team, and you secure your CapEx budget. And remember what you're doing here is you're projecting that in a time of uncertainty. You don't know whether that project beef jerky, you don't know if consumers are going to like beef jerky, if you really forecasted far enough ahead of how much demand you're going to see for beef jerky, and you've got a website, an e-commerce application, and a mobile application, and you're getting all that out there in a time of uncertainty. You don't know. Your marketing team's helping you figure out what project beef jerky will look like, but you still really don't know. So you go through all the approval process, your idea gets accepted, you go in, get the approvals, you're provisioning, you're going to HP or Dell, getting that hardware, deploying it into your data center, cabling it, configuring it, and then you turn it over to the applications organization so that they can test the applications. So about 3 months have gone by, and you launch Project Beef Jerky. So your consumers like beef jerky. Sometimes they like it a lot. Sometimes they don't like it so much. So when they like it a lot and you've under-provisioned those resources, guess what's happening? You're scrambling as the IT organization to grab more infrastructure. And during those periods of time, your consumers are coming to your website, but the performance is degraded. So do your end users sit and wait for Project Beef Jerky to come back up? No, they probably don't. They go to some other provider of beef jerky. So when the demand for Project Beef Jerky is low, you've over-provisioned those resources. So you thought about, you got that CapEx dollar, and now those resources are sitting in your data center underutilized. So let's talk about the cloud financial model now. So we didn't have to think about CapEx. We didn't have to go and get all those approval process to fund Project Beef Jerky. We just went to the service provider and said, hey, I need some compute resources. I'm about to launch an application. You turn those compute resources over to developers. They do some testing, and you're launching at or near time zero. So Project Beef Jerky, it's out there. It's about it's the same, no different. That model is about the same. You've got demand for beef jerky out there. Now, what the difference here is that you're matching your capacity to demand. And what you're doing is you're spinning up and spinning down those compute resources to actually match the demand for beef jerky. So let's take a look at it from an ROI perspective and how you model this out. So there's a little bit of magic here, a little bit of marketing math, and this is really for illustration purposes. So it's kind of back of the envelope. So Project Beef Jerky yields you about $200K a month in revenue. So think about, remember, in the old traditional way, it took you 3 months to provision and procure all that hardware, get it set up. So you lost 3 months of that revenue in that fiscal year. So you had a cost associated with that. Remember back in the CapEx, OpEx model, you have to take that CapEx because now you're depreciating that asset that's attached to beef jerky. In a traditional IT model, that resource is always on. So you have always on compute. And let's say the per unit cost of your compute resources is $1. So calculating that all out, your compute cost for those 9 months are $66,000. And your total return on your total cost is $81K. And finally, that return on your investment that you made for all that infrastructure nets out to be about $1.7 million. Let's take a look at it in the cloud way. So this time around, you've got faster time to market. So you were able to maximize your revenue in that first fiscal year. Same results, $200K, but you maximized the revenue in that first fiscal year. Your costs have changed. And the reason for this is no CapEx, you're not depreciating that asset over the life of the asset. And here you're exploiting the fact that you can turn on and turn off the compute resources. So your costs overall are lower. Now I will say, remember back to the leasing or the renting model versus the buying model, your per unit costs for cloud are more expensive, but you're exploiting that ability to turn on and turn off your resources. So therefore your costs are lower. You've got 25% more expensive, but you've got 45% less usage of that compute resources because you're turning on and turning off of that capacity. So total cost now is about $60,000, and you've changed the return on your investment. Now it's $2.3 million. You got 12 months of revenue, and your costs were lower, so therefore your ROI was better in the cloud model. And to be exact, or again, marketing math, is about 36% more profitable. So let's also think about all the other infrastructure that's caught up in non-revenue generating activities. All the things that are there to support that application. Things like test dev infrastructure, staging environments, disaster recovery. These are all the infrastructure assets that are there to support the application, but they're not generating revenue for the business. So now that we have a good handle on ROI in the cloud, let's think about how you're going to track and forecast for the cloud. So my belief is that the concept of ROI with cloud is going to change. And what you're going to get to do is create project-based accounting. And this is a whole concept of where you're applying the direct cost to a project, and you're looking at it project by project. So think about the traditional data center model. You have a lot of infrastructure in your data center that is shared by all of your application resources. Things like your network, your power, and your cooling. It's really, really hard to take those costs and pinpoint those directly to a particular project. But in the cloud world, you're actually taking all those computing costs and you're applying it directly to an application. So this is why I believe that you're going to move to a project-based accounting methodology. What are some of those benefits? Well, because you're doing this, now you have real-time ROI assessments. You're able to identify your applications that perform very, very well. Those are your star performance. And you're able to course correct. So, think about that idea and that innovation or the experimentation model. If those applications don't work out, you're not yielding that ROI that you were expecting or not yielding the revenue that you were expecting, you have the flexibility to course correct. And finally, you have the ability to pull the plug. So those applications are not working out, you return those compute resources back to the service provider. So what are you doing? How are you doing this? So you're spotting the ability of applications to have variance in demand. So these are the common use cases for demand scenarios, applications that can fit the cloud model. things like periodic applications. These usually model financial applications that are being turned up or turned down. Bursting applications are things that you need to spin up compute resources, maybe for seasonality. We're coming up on the holiday season. You need to spin up a website because you have your most demand. But the rest of the year, those assets are sitting idly. The one down here on the bottom is the daily cycle. So think about an email application. When your users come in, they log on, they go get their email, and at the end of the day, they spin that down. So what you're really doing is you're exploiting this variation in demand, and you're turning up computing resources or you're turning them down. Now, what we have in our cloud marketplace toolset is a company called Cloudability. And the first step to really getting a handle on spotting these application demand patterns is really using a tool like Cloudability to get a handle on your application spend, your cloud computing usage. What are your end users doing with the cloud? And that's going to collect a lot of data, and you'll be able to analyze it and start spotting those application demand patterns. So after you've done that, you're going to be able to use your demand patterns to forecast and plan for the future. So you're thinking about all those different applications that you're deploying out there. You're understanding those characteristics and behaviors of projects, and you're collecting a lot of data about those applications. After you've done that, you're grouping those applications into similar application demand patterns. After that, you're establishing assumptions and benchmarking because you're getting really, really good about understanding those applications and how they're using. So think about back to our scenario in the CapEx model. We had to forecast in a period of uncertainty. Once you start taking a look at going towards this type of model of spotting those application demand patterns, it's easier to forecast. And you can forecast your spend for your strategic initiatives and make your finance guys really happy. So remember, when you move from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, your finance guys don't really like it because that means that those costs are variable. But as you start using these demand patterns and exploiting and planning for that, you'll be able to get much better at OpEx forecasting. The next thing is to leverage a hybrid model. And here what you're doing is you're taking an approach of the cloud-first approach. You've got a mandate for DevOps, so your developers, your operations teams are looking to develop new applications in the cloud. You're taking that cloud-first mentality. So you always start with your applications in the cloud. Because you're going through the process of understanding those application demand patterns, when those demand patterns start to drop off and they become more flatlined, you can take those applications and you can move them back to your traditional IT. Because remember, computing costs in the cloud model are more expensive. But as those applications become more flatlined, it may make sense to move those applications into your existing data center. So finally, let's take a look at how to take control of your cloud strategy. So there's a tug-of-war that's going on in your company, and that tug-of-war is really about who owns or who's going to manage technology spend. Is it the CIO? Is it the CMO? Is it the CFO? Even if it's a CIO that's thinking about cloud computing and already adopting that, they've got a struggle going on within their organization. And that struggle is between control versus trust, CapEx cost versus OpEx cost, fixed capacity versus scalable capacity. What's going to be required here is that you've got leadership at the top. Your leaders need to get on the same page. So think about the C-level conversations that are going on right now. The CIO is typically the pragmatic. They're looking at, how do I deliver services faster for my business? How do I adopt a cloud computing strategy? All the way at the other side, you've got the visionary, the CTO or the chief architect. They're thinking about building applications at web scale. They want to be able to federate those applications. You got the CMO over there in the bottom. They're thinking about launching that new marketing campaign and taking those technology dollars and sinking them into marketing. On the other side, you've got the business unit leader, and they're thinking about technology saying, hey, that's my dollar, that's my budget. Let me control my budget in the way that I want to manage the budget. And at the middle of this, you've got the CFO. And they're really caught up in the whole cloud adoption buying decision process making. And so what I believe is that the role of the CFO is evolving. They're going to get more technology savvy and think about business innovation. The way that they're treating the IT assets have changed. The capital expenditures have changed. You're shifting from CapEx to OpEx dollars. The financial models have changed as well. The impact on your revenue, your profits and margin, all have changed because you're adopting cloud. You have to get very cloud savvy as a CFO because you have to understand how cloud impacts governance or compliance or security requirements. The final thing is that the CFO has to get good at vetting service providers. So they're looking for service providers that are out there that have financial strength. Because think about what you're doing. You're taking your applications and you're moving those to a service provider. You need to think about how that service provider manages their financials. And finally, they have to think about exit strategy if you have to move those applications back in-house. So the CFO is shaping technology decisions. So creating a cloud strategy, what we're seeing is that not one size fits all. Consumers of cloud are looking for an ability to mix and match their clouds. They're thinking about private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, and dedicated infrastructure. So the breadth of portfolio becomes really, really important. You need the right solution to suit your business needs. And I promise this is the only slide that talks about Rackspace. So we have a portfolio approach to the cloud. We've got all kinds of services available, from traditional dedicated hosting to hybrid cloud to public cloud to private cloud, and we also support business applications. So how do we put this plan into practice? So I'm going to wrap it all up here. Smart approach to cloud adoption is first, embrace cloud as a business model shift. Create your service catalog. So make innovative shadow IT work for you as an IT organization. Build your DevOps organization. Take a cloud-first approach. You're taking those developers and those operations teams, and you're getting them on the same page, and you're developing applications with the mind of cloud as the standardized platform. Focus your resources on innovation. Drive value for the business. Maximize your ROI with cloud computing. And then finally, drive value back into your business by taking control of your cloud computing strategy. So building a smart cloud strategy really takes a mind shift set to adopting that service provider mentality, focusing on your applications, mandating DevOps, empowering a self-service organization. All those things are going into your cloud computing strategy. And you also want to think about focusing on your core competency as the business. And that's helping you to take control of your IT strategy or cloud strategy. So you may have heard of, is the CIO role going to go away because now everything's moving to the cloud, so we don't need IT anymore, right? The CMO is going to take over. They're going to control the technology expenditures. But I really say that, no, that's not really going to happen. I think that CIO roles becomes even more important today. Because think about it. The CIO, if you adopt this smart cloud approach, they're at the center of it all. They're advising the business on how to spend those IT dollars. You can sit down and have now pragmatic conversations with the C-level on how you take that budget and you've got your spend versus your get. What do you get as a result of a technology expenditure? And they're having also conversations with the business, and they're advising the business on what's the best way to spend your technology dollars. So last slide here is, at Rackspace, we want you to get smart on cloud. So we have a number of resources that are available to you, all free. We've got Cloud Vision to Reality white papers. We've got case studies. We have Cloud University. Anybody seen Cloud U? Has anybody taken Cloud U? It's free training available to anybody. You don't have to be a customer of Rackspace. We want you to all to get educated on cloud. you can go out there and take that and get a Cloud U certification. We also have a LinkedIn forum. It's called the Enterprise Cloud Forum. And starting this month, we're going to start a monthly series of interactive webinars. And we're bringing our own IT organization from Rackspace, who is also going through the cloud journey. And through our Enterprise Cloud Forum, you'll get to interact with our CIO, some of their VPs, as they're making that journey to the cloud. And we're advising you on that with our enterprise architects. So I run enterprise technical sales again, and through that, I have a team of enterprise architects that help and advise you through our advisory services team. So thank you, and I really appreciate your time.
And thank you, Lisa Larson. Very intriguing presentation. You're competing now with the show floor being open and the fact that they're serving coffee there. So there might be a sudden exodus. But if you would like to stay and take a question, I'm certainly here, and I think Lisa would be fine. So there comes a question right at the back.
Hi. In one of the slides, you mentioned that at some point, it's a beneficial ROI to move the cloud into the local IT organization. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the question was about taking that application, once you've moved it to the cloud, it may make sense to move it back into your data center. And the reason for that is remember the slide when I talked about variations in demand. Where cloud computing doesn't make sense is when that demand for the service becomes flatlined. So think about those applications. As long as they're going up and down, spinning up and down, you're taking advantage of being able to turn on or turn off that compute. But when that application becomes flatline, the unit cost is actually lower by moving that back into your own data center.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at, I can barely see you because of the lights. Where's the point? Oh, right in the back.
You mentioned changes for the CFO role and them becoming more savvy. Or do you see a similar change happening on the legal side of the organization?
The legal side, is that?
Yeah, the legal.
Yeah, I think so. I think they have to get savvy. Also, think about vetting out your service provider. Your legal organization and your procurement organization have to get really good at getting the right contract. So as you're moving to a service provider model, you want to make sure that you're negotiating the right contract for you and your business. So I believe that the legal team is also going to get more cloud savvy.
There you are. I think we shall say thank you in turn to Lisa Larson.
Thank you.
And to Rackspace, of course.